who wants to intervene. Sister Alford, please.
Very much. I have a kind of reflection which relates both to Jeffrey's paper and to yours, Jose. Because at the end you start talking about, I mean, in a way it comes up throughout, but particularly at the end you start talking about 3-hour day and this kind of thing, which also Jeffrey was talking about. And it makes me think, the more I listen to these talks and think about this question of work in this changing situation we're in, the more I think that we have to have a historical perspective on this. I mean, if we think about the early Industrial Revolution, we had a lot of resistance from workers to work a fixed number of hours every day. They were not at all used to it before they had to go into factories. And there were all kinds of things which the British workers used to do, like have a Saint Monday, which they could have Monday off, you know. And they thought they just worked enough until they had what they wanted, and then they didn't want to work anymore, you know. So we had to, of course, then be subjected to this process that we're completely used to now, of having needs and wants generated within us by all kinds of techniques to make us feel like we need more things. I think this question, which relates a bit to sometimes when I've heard Stefano talking about citizens' income or basic income, to explore a bit with you the connection between work and earning our keep, earning what we need to live. You know, one of the things that seems to be happening now is that we can separate more and more these two things. The work doesn't necessarily have to be connected with where we get income from to live. And how much should we try to keep those two things connected? You know, coming back to the fact that this isn't just a sort of adapting ourselves to a kind of natural process. This is the sort of thing that we can influence, you know. What should be our position towards this? Because on the one hand, we want people to be able to write poetry and teach immigrants languages and bring up children and do all those kinds of things that especially women in the past have had a lot of difficulty doing because they haven't been paid for doing it. And so if we can pay people in a different way so they're freer to do this kind of thing, well, I think that's, at least insofar as we've said it there, it's an advantage. But we don't want to, I think, create the sort of thing that you sometimes get with welfare systems today, which is that you have a sort of negative effect on people, that they don't feel they're able to participate. They're not contributing something. Now, I think that's partly to do with what you might call path dependency. You know, if we were 500 years ago or 300 years ago, before the Industrial Revolution, that might not be a problem. Or before this very profound effect that the Protestant work ethic, or whatever we want to say, the modern way of thinking about work, combined with the Industrial Revolution, has had on our mentality. You know, maybe we would be able to separate earning our income from our work very easily and it not have a negative psychological and sociological effect on us. But I'm not sure that we can do that right now. At least if we look at things like people on welfare today, we think about unemployment as quite a negative thing for people. And partly it's because they don't have money, but more it's because of their lack of possibility to participate. So I think this whole question is a lot to do with the historical situation we're in, and we might find that we have to think about this situation a different way in different parts of the world. You know, Latin America may not have the same the same way it needs to react to this as UK or Germany or India, you know, this kind of thing. I'm not sure, I'm just thinking aloud with you now. Your two papers made me think about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Marta.
Your paper, and yeah, maybe this is now a follow-up on this, and this is a question for the previous two talks too, because the question is related with how we foresee the jobs related with care, in a wider sense. So education is part of those jobs, I would say, but also healthcare, domestic jobs, right? Because they hardly found a real place in the previous labor market, right? Because they were not paid or recognized. And sometimes in some countries, as you mentioned, the last talk, in some countries in the north of Europe, as far as I know, at least, they are paid by the local authorities, let's put it that way, right? But I don't see that this is, or can be, the desirable solution either, because we do know that cultures are different, there are values behind this, the way we organize or we offer, we perform these kind of tasks, jobs, right? So I have a question, right, on this kind of, and they are manual, so to some extent they can be, yeah, there are machines that can do a lot of things, but we still need to take care of the others through our own bodies. Kids and babies do need kisses and hugs and so on, also from a biological point of view. So there is something very fundamentally human there. And we know by experience now, if you think of the experience we have from Taiwan, they have been endorsing this kind of public healthcare system, right, that is actually offering any kind of services through digital systems. But at the end of the day, humans, when they are really sick and they know that they are going to die, they do ask for human answering on the phone and taking care of them, and they don't, yeah. So even at the economic point of view, now anything which is bio is much more expensive. And restaurants and even wellness and spa, right, in different countries around the world are very expensive if you have people, not machines, taking care of your body, right? So I'm just wondering if, well, it's an open question because I think that this is an important, and maybe at least probably my answer would be that care as such, so the caring dimension that is still possible within any kind of job is what we have to focus on at some point and to see how we can endorse, how we can pursue, right, those. Anyway, I'm much more interested in your answers on this, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Respond.
Anybody else? Then Jose and Jeffrey afterwards, if he wants to add something. Oh, before Professor Nofa, very, very shortly, please. Thank you.
I wanted to say it's a good paper. There are common links in with the presentation Jeffrey made, your paper and my paper. Maybe we're all economists, but also with the metal union workers paper. We all see, we don't take the techno-pessimistic, also not the techno-optimistic, but if we act, if there is policy, then we can avail ourselves of the opportunity and diminish the risk of this revolution. The one thing I want to point out, there are many things that I like about your paper. The one thing that I point out in relation to solutions, you should talk about competent, we have talked about education, quality education, you call it competent education, we have talked about retraining, but you talk about flexibility in learning, which is key. In this new digital economy, not only we have to learn fast, we have to de-learn fast. We need to reinvent ourselves all the time. And this is key. So flexibility is a very good concept in learning and in de-learning as well. Well, I have some academic reflections, but there is no time regarding Marx's labor theory of value and the concept of capital in the digital economy, where knowledge is also capital. In the science-based economy, knowledge, personal knowledge is also capital. It's not just machines or money. But I won't go into Marx's theory of value also. We're doing free work for Google. Each time we do search, we leave our data So that's free work. That's free work that is not being remunerated. We get free service, but we're doing free work.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jose, are you ready?
Yeah, Helen, you are absolutely right. But my idea is all of us, we criticize what happens. It's too close to the microphone? Okay. It means technology. No, I mean, we used to criticize and correctly all what is material dimension of life. But we need to be sincere, because when we refer to categories, for instance, in the work-man relationship, work-person relationship, we are only fixed on the material side. We are fixed on hours, that is a scarce resource. We look at wages. We look finally at effort and of responsibility in case that will derive an economic responsibility. If this is only moral responsibility, that will be okay. But this is one of our sins. If we were perfect angels, that will not happen. But in fact, the question is the relation the person with the work. This position that you mentioned is very common in volunteers. Why? Because they are not paid. This is just that movement comes from the inside to help, to do something for others, to work for society, or for one goal outside of trade, of market. And this is out completely, unfortunately, about the work. In fact, we are talking very common, the dignity of work. The only dignity of work is because it's the man who makes the work, because who is entitled of dignity is man itself, as created by God at his image. And this is the reason and the origin of the dignity. And then the act of man presides by the will of man to do it. You may imagine, we need to be prepared for this type of discourse. Something could say that a robot is subject of will. The robot will never be subject of will. The robot will do it, the order that he has inside of him. And this is, but we malform the language. And this situation has quite influence even in the categories of the persons of that. Later in the presentation of Jeffrey Sachs, mentioned the promoters of the Adam Smith theory of the wealth of nations. These are the governors of the United States. But this Adam Smith of the wealth of nations, all forget about the Adam Smith of the theory of moral sentiments. This is out of consideration. Why? Because that one is moral. And Adam Smith called virtuous men that one that renounce to self-will and just offer all his possibilities to the rest of humanity. But this is forgotten. This is not easy to sell. And for these reasons, we forget about. Then I think that in labor happens something like that, you see. And then the solutions for that, what is you mentioned flexibility. What means flexibility? Flexibility is to be prepared to do what people want that I must do. That's all flexibility. I'm coming from Spain. That this is such a fascinating country that during the period, the government of Felipe González, that is quite a long government in Spain, was 3 legislatures. We are reaching a level of 23, 25 in several moments of unemployment. At that time, the people unemployed wants to find work in my in-house and the work that I can do without effort. And without effort today is in the popular conversation and also in announcements. You can learn Germany in 15 days without effort. You can learn German. That's something you can live astonished. Then I think the work will exist. Then after, just immediately, due to the revolutions, will exist. But of course, it's a question of productivity. Why not we do the things like in 18th century? Okay, that could happen, but we should prepare to live as in the 18th century. All of us here in this meeting are living much better than Charles I of Spain and 5th of Germany was emperor. We are living much better than Charles I. And then, shall we go back? We need to go back in all conditions, not only because of circumstances of pollution, of whatever. What is today that kind that we don't agree. Then the flexibility is the same. We need to be prepared to those areas. In Japan, still 45 years ago, in any company, the new employee is the grandson of the old employer, the old employed. Then this is finished for many times in the rest of the world. And this, we will not have work forever. We need to be flexible, to adapt, to recycle, to lifelong learning, and in order to be in conditions to face what the new technology is asking from us.
Thank you, Jose. And now, Jeffrey, would you like to add a few words, if you like? Otherwise, okay, just a few words. Thank you.
I think we've discussed well the themes. Empirically, the link between our work effort and our incomes is already somewhat tenuous in many countries, and in the best countries, quite different categories. In the countries that really aim for the common good and have the highest levels of satisfaction with life, particularly in Northern Europe, the link between your market income and your material conditions of life are not very strong. First of all, wage setting is across the nation. It's not individualistic. It's at the level of major sector. It's at a high level of union business enterprise settlement. But then there's tremendous family support, tremendous access to public services, tremendous access to public infrastructure, so that everybody lives decently. And they face the same market conditions that those in the US face with its deep underclass, for example. And so this is a matter of politics and philosophy, but we should already 75 years ago been past the ideology that you are what your market income determines. It's mostly ideology anyway, though it's it's more true in the US and the UK than it is in the social democratic countries. And the outcomes are as clear as can be, that there is a deep underclass and major social pathologies, and now a major backlash politically in the countries with higher inequalities. And so it also leads to social instability and eventually to monsters like Trump or Boris Johnson or others who are a kind of pathology of politics. And we are reaping what we've sown in this way. So I think that this is a pretty clear avenue forward.
The time is over. I think there will be time at the end of the afternoon. Just a short, very short.
That we might want to look at the numbers that in Scandinavia, happy countries, but the fertility rate, the will to share the wealth through generations is low. The fertility rate is way below 2. And I think if we are at the Vatican, we are created in the image of God, providence, to provide to a personal God. So when we look at generations, and care is an important point, it should be fundamentally personal, and technology can come only as make life easier. Like ploughing is easier than hand tools, plowing, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will come back on 5:30 sharp, okay? Thank you.